This is Oklahoma in the Valero Alamo Bowl, and we're giving you a preview of the matchup today on Locked on Pac-12 podcast.
You are Locked on Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Pac-12 podcast, where we are free and available on all platforms. Thank you so much for making Locked on Pac-12 podcast your first listen every day. I'm your host, Cindy Robinson, former Pac-12 student athlete, and joining me today is Locked on Ducks host, Spencer McLaughlin. Spencer, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. It's great to be back on the show after I was AWOL last week, but back and ready to get into it.
It's okay. It was the holiday times. We know it's difficult to get with each other and schedules not aligning, but we're back today just in time for the Alamo Bowl. Okay, I will let you know now how big it is that the Ducks are actually playing in this bowl game. We're going to say fingers crossed that actually happens, because just yesterday, the Holiday Bowl was canceled literally like 4 or 5 hours before kickoff. And so the way bowl games have been happening this season, not everyone has actually happened. A lot of them have been canceled due to COVID-19 issues, a lack of players, I guess, being able to play for certain teams. And I'll just say this. I'm excited to see a Pac-12 team play. I know Oregon State already played, but there were some issues going on with Washington State, and we weren't sure if they were going to get to play. So I'm excited to see a bowl game happening. For you, how are you feeling about this matchup going into tonight?
Well, I'm definitely excited and hopeful that the game will actually happen. I was really bummed that the Holiday Bowl got canceled because I think it was going to be a great game. I think Vegas had it as like a 2.5 point spread. They had NC State favored because they're the ranked team, but UCLA playing on the West Coast, they probably would have had a good turnout from fans. It just sucks for all the players and coaches who got ready. And everyone was literally there. They were there in San Diego. NC State, they came literally all the way across the country, and then they don't get to play. And so I feel for them, because that just the whole thing sucks, and we all know that. But the Alamo Bowl for Oregon, I think, is a good opportunity in a number of ways for the Ducks to end their season on a high note after kind of stumbling to the finish line with the 2 blowout losses to Utah. And you go from a month ago, Oregon was controlling its own destiny to get into the college football playoff, and then here you are a month later in the Alamo Bowl. And it's all fair in love and war, because we did that to Utah a few years ago. So now they do it to us. They were on the cusp of making the playoff. We beat them in the Pac-12 championship game, knocked them out of that. So I'm happy for the Utes. I was at that game, and Utah fans are great, and I'm glad they get the chance to go to the Rose Bowl and for the first time ever. And I think that'll be a great game with Ohio State. But looking at Oregon in the Alamo Bowl, great stat for you, Cindy. This is the first time that 2 teams have met in the Alamo Bowl, and they both have 10 wins. It's the first time that's ever happened in the history of the bowl, which is I was kind of surprised, just based on how the conferences have shaken out over the years. It just hasn't happened until now. But I think it sets the stage for a really big time matchup between 2 very prominent programs in Oregon and Oklahoma. And it's a chance for both sides, especially the young players, to show what they're made of, what they're capable of, and give themselves an edge as you look ahead to spring ball and, the depth chart and who's going to get playing time and all that sort of stuff. If you have a big game as, a freshman or sophomore who hasn't played a lot in a game like this, especially when you have players opting out, which we'll get to, that creates opportunities. And if you're able to show up, then you can really establish yourself as a mainstay player for Oregon football, or same thing for Oklahoma on the other side. And I think it should be a really exciting game. The line has actually jumped. It jumped like 2 points yesterday, which is a lot for those of you that follow Vegas out there. A 2-point jump is not insignificant. It was Oklahoma -4.5. Now it's Oklahoma -6.5. So the bettors right now clearly really like Oklahoma. And I think that there's a geographical advantage there because it's in Texas. So they'll probably have, more fans there than the Ducks will, even though Oregon fans typically travel well. But, I'm just excited to, see who's able to show up, how we're able to compete against a team like Oklahoma. And look, I know Oregon fans are probably going to be slightly disappointed looking back on the season after where it was, right? It was 9-1, and then it ended up at 10-3 by the time the regular season ended. But if you can look back and not feel great about a season where you beat Ohio State and Oklahoma, playing neither team at home, I think that's, that's a statement about where your program is. And, an opportunity to play on national television like this is always a good one for a brand in Oregon that I think continues to grow.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. This is a great opportunity for Oregon to redeem themselves after those last two tough games. And honestly, no better team than a ranked team like Oklahoma. So we're going to get into the players that will be expected to play in this Oregon on this Oregon team, and some of those who opted out coming up next. It's the new year, so that means New Year resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. So we know, like, when you make these New Year resolutions about getting fit and getting healthy, getting healthy, you want to eat healthy, but it gets so boring. Like, the food gets mundane. It's not necessarily always the best tasting. And you're always looking for that piece of chocolate. Well, Built Bar is the answer to that. Built Bar is 100% covered in chocolate, real chocolate at that. It's low in calories, low in sugar, low in net carbs, but high in protein. You basically can compare it to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, but the Built Bar only has around 130. So you're saving yourself here. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and there's so many flavors to choose from. Coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, minted brownie, and many more. In fact, Built Bar is always coming out with new limited time flavors. So check out built.com often to see what's new. Go to built.com and use promo code and get 15% off your order. That's the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. That's LOCKED15. Do not miss out on an amazing opportunity and a healthy but tasty snack. Thanks again for making Locked On Pac-12 podcast your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021. Local experts, betting advice, and draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview is live now. Okay, Spencer, so we're talking Alamo Bowl, and Oregon is going to be without some players while they're also having some players return. It's a deep list, and it kind of gets a little confusing after a while. I think everyone is aware of, like, one of the bigger names that they'll be missing. That's Kayvon Thibodeau, who decided to opt out because he's getting ready for a draft. No, I don't want to say any surprises there. We know how big his draft stock is. If you know anything about Kayvon Thibodeau, you know how serious he is about his brand and taking every step, very calculated, that, when it comes to his career and future endeavors. So no surprises there. We're wishing him the best of luck because we hope to see him, his name called very early on draft day. But right, exactly. But with the guys that you do have available, are you feeling confident in this Oregon team up against this Oklahoma team?
I think the matchup is tough in a way, but these two teams really have different strengths. Oklahoma's strength is on the offensive side of the ball, and I think they've got the better quarterback in this game in Caleb Williams, though he's been inconsistent at times. I think when you look at his body of work in 2021, it's better than what Anthony Brown has put out this year. And defensively, I think that's where Oregon has the advantage, even without Kayvon Thibodeau and another guy they're missing who's going to the NFL, Mikhail Wright, who's probably Oregon's best corner this year. So you lose your best pass rusher, you lose your best corner. That's a lot to overcome on the defensive side of the ball. But I think even still with those losses, Oregon's defense is a better defensive unit than Oklahoma's. But I don't know if without those guys, they're going to be able to contain Oklahoma's offense because they've got some really explosive players. And I think the tough part as well is, and I alluded to this earlier, is that it's being played in Texas. So Oklahoma fans have to go, like a few hours drive time or a puddle jump of a flight, depending on where they're coming from to get to the game. And Oregon fans have to go all the way to Texas, and it's the Alamo Bowl, so it's not a New Year's Six, so you probably don't expect the stadium to sell out. But however many fans they end up having, I think you're going to have about a 70 to 30, maybe even higher percentage in favor of Oklahoma fans. And this year, that's where Oregon has really struggled. I mean, you look at the blowout loss to Utah on the road, that game never really felt close, and Oregon just didn't look ready to show up. And then the Pac-12 championship game, I was there. That was a road game. I mean, it was 85% Utah fans. They were showing up in a big way, and they packed Allegiant Stadium. It was an awesome environment, but it was essentially a road game. And this could certainly feel like that. I don't think the crowds will be quite on that level, but I think that's the area that has me concerned the most, is what is Oregon's best road performance in 2021? Maybe Washington, I guess, but Washington turned out to be not a very good team. And it was an ugly weather day, so Oregon was able to rely on that offensive line. But you just look at the games they play. Well, the best road performance this year would be Ohio State. Lest I forget. If I had forgotten to mention that, I think I would have been fired as the host of the show. But that was the first and only time this year that we've seen Oregon show up on the road. And, clearly they were prepared for that game. So that should give Duck fans some level of optimism, because also remember, Oregon didn't have Kayvon Thibodeau in that game against Ohio State either. And though they allowed a bunch of yards, they allowed, few enough points to where they were able to ultimately win the game. So, but after that, the road performances have just not really been there. And so I worry about that. And anytime you're doing a long travel like Oregon is having to do versus Oklahoma's going a shorter distance, that's always an advantage for the Sooners. And, it's just been such an inconsistent team for the Ducks this year that feeling supremely confident isn't something I can say that I've got right now. I want to, of course, I want Oregon to win every game from now until the end of time, but I don't always think that that's going to be the case. And can they win this game? Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of ways that this game could play out where Oregon wins. But if you look at all the possible scenarios, I think that there's more that favor Oklahoma than favor Oregon in the end.
Yeah, I will say Oregon's defensive coordinator has a positive attitude about what they're dealing with as far as, lacking some players, especially when it comes to losing players to injuries and some academic reasons. They kind of dealt with losing players throughout the season. Kayvon Thibodeau, Justin Flo, Drew Mathis, all of them at some point dealt with the injury or were out at some point in the season. And so it has been a very next man up mentality throughout the season, which is kind of positive, because if you already know, like, this is what it is, this is how we have to do things, this is what's fell in our lap, then you're kind of prepared for this bowl game and knowing that, like, whoever's on the field is giving their all because they know what's on the line, but they know how to be the next man up and be ready.
Yeah, and one thing that is encouraging for Oregon, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, is I believe Bennett Williams is expected to play. And he's a guy who got injured earlier this year, I think against Arizona maybe. And he is a really talented defensive back. So you get him back and you lose Mikhail Wright. I think on the whole, they're different kind of players. Williams is not an outside corner the way that Mikhail Wright is, but having a playmaker like that, and Bennett Williams is really good, having a playmaker like that come back to boost the secondary when they're losing, probably their top guy, maybe Verone McKinley, I think actually has had a better season, but Wright is their top corner and McKinley plays safety. I think that's going to help tremendously, not just for the morale on the defensive side, but just from a schematical standpoint. If you can have Bennett Williams out there as sort of the nickel corner, or have him playing safety, and then put Dante Manning on one side and maybe Jamal Hill on the other, I think there's still a lot of talent there on the back end for Oregon, and the linebacking unit has seen its fair share of injuries this year. I think Oregon fans, we really got deprived this year of seeing Noah Sewell and Justin Flo, because those two guys are monsters, and they'll be back next year because Sewell's got one more year to play at Oregon, and then he'll go to the NFL because he's a 260-pound guy who runs like a 4.5. I mean, he's a freak of nature, and so is Justin Flo. But the recruiting trio of Thibodeau, and Sewell and Flo. I would have loved to see them play a game together, and we really didn't get that. I don't think there was any crossover because Flo got hurt against Fresno State, so we only got to see it for like a half. But there's still a lot of talent on the defense, but Oklahoma has the ability to be very explosive, and Caleb Williams is someone who can challenge you at the quarterback position for Oklahoma with his legs. But where he really has hurt people this year is with the deep ball, and if he and Mims start getting on the same page for connecting over the top, that could be a problem for Oregon. And this year, I think they've actually done a good job of not allowing the big play, but they have allowed the chunk plays. The big plays are like the 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns.
Right.
They haven't allowed many of those this year. I'd have to think back and see if there were really even any, but they have been susceptible at times to the chunk plays. So I'll be interested to see how this interim Oklahoma staff under Bob Stoops wants to treat the offensive approach and whether or not they want to just take what you can get underneath. Because I think Oregon, as I said, has been good at stopping the big play, but they've been susceptible to getting beat underneath, sometimes because they play a lot of soft zone. And I'll be very interested to see, with the personnel shortages that Oregon is going to have on defense, no Thibodeau, no Mikael Wright, how they decide to play against this Oklahoma offensive attack. And, it's going to be a challenge without Thibodeau to provide pressure, because that guy's an absolute beast. I mean, he's
different type of player right there.
Yeah, he's a guy who offensive coordinators have to scheme around. You have to, help in pass protection or roll away from him or design quick throws so you can get the ball out. Oregon in that game against Ohio State, they allowed a lot of yards, and one of the reasons really was not that the secondary didn't play well, but because C.J. Stroud had way too much time to throw. And when Thibodeau has not been on the field this year, the Oregon defensive line has struggled mightily to get pressure. And Brandon Dorlus is a guy who did you see his joke with the media?
I did.
He was doing a presser, and they were asking him about his future plans because he's an NFL caliber guy as well. And they said, "So what are you going to do in the future?" He goes, "Oh, I'm declaring for the draft." No, I'm just kidding. I'm coming back. And so he is going to come back in 2022, but he is now Oregon's best defensive lineman, bar none. And I mean, it's really not even close. He's been the most consistent playmaker that they're going to have in this game that's been there throughout the course of the season.
Right.
So I think that's, something to watch for in this game is if Caleb Williams is sitting back there with 4, 5, and 6 seconds to throw the ball, you just can't ask guys to cover that long, especially against a team like Oklahoma with really talented wide receivers and offensive skill guys. It's just not a reasonable request. So I'll be interested to see how they use pressure, how they, play on the edges with regards to how the pass rush is. I imagine they'll be pretty, kind of standard in the early going to see what that defensive line is doing and then adjust as the game goes on.
All right. Well, coming up next, Spencer and I will give you a little bit of, breakdown of what you should know about Oklahoma going into this matchup. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowls season and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. So head to the website or use the mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, so we can't end a game preview without giving you some insight into the opponent. I'm sure that if you're listening, you already know what you need to know about Oklahoma, but just in case you don't, Spencer has you covered because he does his due diligence and he is very knowledgeable about this opponent. More than anything, I want to know what you feel like is going to be the biggest threat from Oklahoma for Oregon.
I think it's Caleb Williams' legs. I was talking earlier about Oregon's ability to get pressure and how that's going to dictate how Tim DeRuyter will call the defense and how that's going to shape up. But part of the problem with not being able to get a good pass rush is oftentimes you'll have defensive ends who will then, try a flurry of moves to get by
Yeah.
the tackles on the outside. But what can happen when you do that is if you go inside, Caleb Williams can go outside the pocket. And if you have defensive linemen who haven't played, as many snaps as you'd perhaps like, now getting significant reps in that particular unit for Oregon defensively, and Caleb Williams is able to break contain, well, then what you'll have to do eventually is you'll take Noah Sewell out of coverage or blitzing, and you'll put him in as a spy. But then that creates matchup numbers on the outside that are favorable for Oklahoma. So one thing I'm going to watch, not just the pass rush itself and whether or not Oregon's able to sack Caleb Williams, but are they able to contain him and make him throw from the pocket, which he's capable of doing. But he's also been inconsistent at times this year. And I think one way that Oklahoma will try to get him going is on the ground. They'll try to run the ball early in this game, and that's something that Oregon at times has really struggled with this year defensively. They've done some things well, but defending the run has not been one of them. Arizona in Autzen Stadium ran the ball consistently, and that's been a trend this year, even when Thibodeau was on the field. And it's all going to come down to that defensive front, and Oklahoma is capable of scoring a lot of points. Now, they're not going to have Lincoln Riley calling the plays, and that helps Oregon a lot. I mean, Bob Stoops has been around, a time or 50 in college football. He knows what he's doing, but you have an interim staff, and Oregon does as well.
I was going to say they both do, so it's kind of like
it's really interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between these two teams, but not having Lincoln Riley over there as a play caller is a big help for Oregon's defense because he is really, really smart. And they'll still run, the same sort of schemes and plays, but when they call specific plays is supremely important, and Lincoln Riley is very, very good at that. That's why his offenses are always so explosive. But there's an unusual number of similarities between these two teams. Both had their head coaches leave and have interim staffs. They've both hired former defensive coordinators from other big-time Power 5 schools to be their head coaches, but neither guy is going to be on the sideline, Brent Venables or Dan Lanning. And both had 10-win seasons that I can guarantee you their fan bases on the whole don't feel very good about. Most programs win 10 games, and they're going, man, what a great season. I mean, how many Pac-12 schools would love to win 10 games? UCLA would, Arizona State would, Arizona would. I mean, just about all of them. But Oregon wins 10 games with the 3 losses, and we look back and go, boy, it's a season of what might have been had, we not had to play Utah or had the Utah games gone differently. And for Oklahoma, they go 10-2. They don't win the Big 12, and that's a major letdown. But for most Big 12 teams, that's a really big deal. And, winning 10 games is a good goal to get to. So they're both feeling that same way. And I think the early momentum could tell a lot about how the game ends up finishing, because both teams have that in the back of their minds, right? Like, we as fans feel this way, but players feel the same way too. Like, Oregon fans know they controlled their own destiny to get to the college football playoff. If they had won out, they would have gotten in, no question, because they had that great win at Ohio State and only one loss. Right. They know that too. And so what I'll look for, and Oklahoma also controlled its own fate to get to the Big 12 championship game, maybe sneak into the playoff. I don't think they would have gotten there, but they could have at least won another Big 12 championship. They've got that in the back of their mind. So if one team gets down, say an early turnover happens and you kicked off and you spot the other team 10 points, kind of before you can blink. Right. How motivated can those players be to still want to show up, or are they just going to feel that it's a continuation of what happened this season, which is, boy, this is not how we wanted it to go. Can't believe this. And they start to think about those games that didn't go their way. So I think early momentum is going to be pretty massive, and it might be one of the few instances in which if I won the toss, I would want the ball first. Yeah. And, I am always a proponent of you defer to the second half. It's a much bigger advantage, but I think in this game, if you get the ball first and you go down and score a touchdown, I think it's going to be even. Yeah, I think it's going to be even more of an advantage because of everything that these teams have gone through and are going through with the coaching change. Yeah. I think early momentum is going to be even more important than normal in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah. Well, Spencer, I greatly appreciate you coming on here and giving us your insight. You guys have to make sure you check out Locked On Ducks on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Spencer's giving you insight like this into the Oregon Ducks every day, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss it at all. Make sure you guys tune in to his post game recap because I'm sure it's coming tomorrow after the Alamo Bowl.
Oh yeah.
You can also follow along is it at Locked On Ducks or is it LO?
It's at Locked On Ducks.
Okay, at Locked On Ducks on Twitter, and then at Smalls_55 for his personal handle. And you can follow Locked On Pac-12 podcast on the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. And then you can also follow along at LO_Pac-12. Okay, really quick, I need your prediction. I don't do the bias prediction. I need the real educated, maybe not Vegas on the line educate, because I think sometimes Vegas can be a little biased, just based off of like, rankings and stuff. And I want to feel like, based on what we know about these two teams in this exact moment, who do you think is taking the Alamo Bowl?
Well, I'll just say that you may think Vegas is biased, but they make a bunch of money for a reason. They are the number of times that I follow NFL spreads and they favor a team by 2.5 and they win by 2. I'm just like, man, you sons of guns did it again. But I think that both teams, as I said, are in very similar situations. And I said this on Locked On Ducks on the most recent episode, the Alamo Bowl preview, which you can check out if you like and subscribe. I don't think Oregon wins. I want them to win, of course, but
right.
I think that just the fact that this game is being played in Texas, I think favors Oklahoma a lot. Yeah. And I know that the guys who will get to see the field for Oregon will come out supremely motivated and they'll want to play hard and show the new coaching staff and the country what they're capable of. But Oklahoma is going to feel that way as well. And I think at the end of the day, Caleb Williams will make one or two more plays than Anthony Brown is able to in this game.
Yeah.
I will say if Oregon runs for 175 or more yards as a team, I think they'd have a great shot to win. But if the offense is not able to throw the ball, then it's going to be tough to run even with that really good offensive line. So I'll go 30. I'll go 30-20. 30-21. I think Oklahoma gets it done, but hoping that I'm wrong.
All right, you heard it here from Spencer. I'm telling you, he's the Oregon expert. So do what you will with that info. But thank you all for making Locked On Pac-12 podcast your first listen every day. Tomorrow we'll probably be talking about the rest of the bowl games happening this week, praying that they actually happen and don't have COVID-19 interfering with them at all. Thankfully, we haven't heard any of that happening with the Alamo Bowl. So fingers crossed that we see a bowl game tonight and all goes well. But now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q and he's giving you expert analysis with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms, so make sure you go ahead and check it out. Other than that, continue to stay Locked On Pac-12 on the Locked On Network.